Right, I think we can go right ahead and begin now. So hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining our Microsoft 365 Copilot webinar. Today we're going to be talking about, Apkala and how we can help you in strategizing and utilizing Microsoft 365 Copilot features, capabilities, and helping you to protect your data as well when it comes to utilizing these AI features. Now, before we dive into the agenda for today, I first would like to start off with an introduction to who Apkala is, and of course, just to provide you guys with some background surrounding who we are. So I am Rachelle Berry, and I'm the Microsoft Solution Specialist here at Apkala. Today we will have our data and analytics lead here at Apkala, which is Jack Bryant, who will be talking about the architecture of Microsoft 365 Copilot, how you can actually protect your data, just to ensure that when it comes to usage and capabilities and access, those are top of mind when these AI features are being used. So first, let's talk about who Apkala is and where we fit into the IT world. Now, here at Apkala, we do offer different IT solutions, and I'll be able to share with you what some of those are. However, we are a technology advisory firm, and we are trusted by more than 400 organizations when it comes to getting IT solutions for their organization. And we also ensure that we are unbiased in our advice. And when there's any technology purchases needed to be made, we have your best interest at heart. So we understand what exactly you are looking for and provide you with a solution that best fits your needs. So there's no one solution that we would recommend. We want to ensure that you are aware of all the solutions that are available, and then you can select the right one that's best suited for your team and for your organization. Now, these are a list of the IT solutions where we engage in. So we have unified communication, SD-WAN, connectivity, infrastructure, mobility, disaster recovery and backup, and a whole lot more. However, today we're going to be honing in on Microsoft 365 for Business, because Microsoft 365 Copilot is one of the SKUs within Microsoft Suite. Now, just to share with you some background on how we are able to resell Microsoft products. Apkala is a Microsoft Solutions Partner for Modern Work. And this is actually a designation that we have earned from Microsoft based on performance requirements that we have met, based on skilling exams, as well as assessments that we have taken. And of course, by demonstrating customer success in deploying Microsoft 365 products. So what this means for you and what are the perks to you as or customer in working with us as your CSP, you'll have one central location when it comes to managing your licenses. So we do offer a Apkala Microsoft portal, which is a self-service portal that you can use to manage your licenses. You can also manage your invoices, and we even have a Apkala Microsoft support chat that's powered by Azure AI. So we've even built our own Copilot tool within our self-service portal that you can utilize to ask questions about your Microsoft 365 licensing. We also offer Premier support at no cost. So when it comes to having tickets escalated to Microsoft, we'll be able to handle that on your behalf, because we are a direct Microsoft partner, which is also known as a tier 1 Microsoft partner, which gives us the ability to submit unlimited requests to Microsoft. And we do have a partner success account manager, what is known as a PSAM, who will be able to escalate on our behalf internally when it comes to driving priority on tickets, as well as getting a resolution within a quickly time frame. We do also offer flexibility when it comes to your contract. So the licensing are currently on new commerce experience, or what you guys may know as NCE. And this gives you the flexibility in either having an annual billing upfront, an annual billed monthly, and then you have the month-to-month option. So that flexibility gives you the opportunity to select which term is best suited for your organization. All right. Now, when it comes to cost, we know that's a big thing for all organizations. So we do offer savings when it comes to that. So there is discounts that we would apply to your licensing, whenever we are, providing you with any quotes. And of course, these discounts, based on other resellers, we do have a discount that's very competitive. So we want to ensure that, customers are able to take advantage of these savings opportunities through us. We also offer full implementation when it comes to deploying the features that you get with your Microsoft products. And if there is any training needed for your employees, we do have a vast amount of training resources that we can offer to you, or we can schedule a call with you just to provide a one-on-one guidance on any specific product that you are interested in learning about. Now, of course, we know that there are going to be questions that you're going to have on a day-to-day basis. So whenever you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. We do have a support email, which is support@apkala.com. So you can send us an email, or you can call or send us a text, and we'll be more than happy to support you with any questions that you might have. Now, just to close out with some of another perk that we offer, we do provide ongoing analysis for your licensing, and as well as helping you to strategize when it comes to building your Microsoft footprint. So unlike other MSPs where it's more of a transaction where they would offer you the licensing and then you would have to figure things out on your own, we do an analysis on your licensing every 6 months, as well as we keep track of your renewals for you. So if there's any changes that needs to be made, we'll also go ahead and schedule meetings, provide you with optimization and recommendation just to ensure that you are getting the most out of your licensing and you are fully taking advantage of the features and benefits of us as your CSP. All right, so that's some background as it relates to who Apkala is and how you can benefit from working with us as your Microsoft CSP or cloud solution provider. All right, now let's dive into the topics that we're going to be discussing in today's webinar. All right, so this is our agenda. So we're going to first start off with an overview of Microsoft 365 Copilot, which will be covered by myself. We will also talk about some of the features and benefits of Microsoft 365 Copilot, and I'll provide you guys as well with some real life experiences because I have been using Copilot myself, and I'll be able to just share some feedback on how I've used it and how it had benefited me. And of course, Jack will also be able to share his experience because we've both been testing out Copilot and gathering feedback so that we can share today with you guys. All right, so Jack will dive in a bit deeper on how Copilot actually works, like what are some of the components, as well as how is your data protected, because of course, that's definitely top priority to ensure that your data does not go in the hands of someone who should not have access to it. All right, and we'll be closing out with some next steps on how you can learn more about Copilot, how you'll be able to get started with Copilot, as well as how you can start strategizing on your own, and of course, ensure that your team is prepared to use Microsoft 365 Copilot. All right, so let's kickstart with an overview of Microsoft 365 Copilot. Now, I first want to highlight that there are different Copilot SKUs. All right, so Copilot for Microsoft 365 is one SKU, and what this is, it's an AI productivity tool that combines large language models, or what we know as LLM, as well as the content from Microsoft Graph, and that is where all Microsoft data is stored, and it works together with the Microsoft 365 apps that we use on a day-over-day basis, like Word, Teams, Outlook, PowerPoint, and the list goes on. So in order to provide you with a breakdown of what Copilot for Microsoft 365 includes, it will be good just to also give you a comparison of the other Copilot SKUs and share with you how Copilot for Microsoft 365 differs. All right, now first, as you can see here, all Copilot SKUs does have the foundational capability, which is it provides you with the ability to ask prompts, and they'll be able to use either the web or your data in order to provide you with the response and the information that you're looking for. So you have a Copilot, Microsoft Copilot for the web, which is for free. So all you need to do is to log in with your Microsoft Entra ID, or what is previously known as Azure Active Directory. The Copilot Pro, this is another individual SKU that you can utilize. There is a cost for that at $20. And then for the Microsoft 365 Copilot, the cost for that is $30 per month. However, I will be sharing with you a little further in the presentation about the terms when it comes to purchasing the Microsoft 365 Copilot. Right? It also provides you with web grounding. So what this basically means is that it uses the web to search for information for you. So all Copilot SKUs uses that. They also have commercial data protection. What this means is that your information is not used to train the AI model, and it doesn't go outside of Copilot. So your information that you're searching for, it's not used, or it's not shared with anyone outside of your organization. All right, now how Copilot for Microsoft 365 differs is that it provides you with priority model access. All right, and this is more of a high performance feature that you'll be able to utilize when it comes to giving you more visibility into data that you're looking for. All right, Microsoft 365 Copilot also works with all of the different applications such as Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, the same for Copilot Pro. However, the difference is that with Microsoft 365 Copilot, this works in Teams, unlike Copilot Pro that does not. All right. Copilot for Microsoft 365 also has Microsoft Graph grounding. What this basically means is that it uses the data that the user has access to, specific to any user access, any applications that they have access to. So if it's a case where there's any sensitivity labels applied and that user does not have access to that specific information, Copilot will not be able to share that information with them. So it uses Microsoft Graph in order to provide that user with information that they have access to. All right. And this basically means that it provides you with enterprise grade data protection. All right. So that is built into Copilot. So if there's any security features that you have set up for your users, that is also applied. So Copilot doesn't override any security features that you have in place. And if at any time you would like to customize it or build your own Copilot, then you also have the Copilot SKU that you can utilize. And we have actually utilized the Copilot SKU as well in building our Upcala Microsoft support chat, which is within our self-service portal. So you can also build your own Copilots. However, if you're looking for a tool that can help you in getting quick actions and tasks completed within your Microsoft 365 app, then Microsoft 365 Copilot is the tool for you. Right, and definitely these are for any organizations that's looking for a way to improve creativity, improve productivity, as well as increase efficiency. So that's what Microsoft 365 Copilot is all about. All right, and if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll definitely be able to address that for you and provide you with the information that you're looking for in learning more about Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now let's talk about the foundation and as well as how it's built. All right, now as you can see here, the layer at the bottom is Copilot for Microsoft 365. However, as you guys can see, there are other Copilot that's built on top of that, and Copilot is your foundation for all Microsoft solutions. So no matter what your role is, whether you're one of the business decision makers or one of the board of directors, whether you're a frontline manager, if you are one of the developers, if you handle client success, business development, if you're in marketing, whether you're a data engineer, or even if you're a security professional, there's a Copilot for you. All right, so as you can see here, if you're a security professional, there's a Copilot for security. So when it comes to getting automations and using AI capabilities to protect your data, you do have this tool that you can utilize. There's also Copilot for Fabric, which is more targeted for data engineers. So if you'll be managing data within Power BI, within Azure Synapse, you have Fabric, which combines all your data into one unified solution, which is one lake. So you can also utilize Copilot for Fabric to help you in automating and getting a quicker resolution when it comes to getting information on your data. All right, if you're handling any client success, if you're handling any business development, or if you're a marketing specialist, you also have Copilot for security that you can utilize. If you're a developer, you have Copilot for GitHub. right? If it's any specific, line of business, you also have Copilot for Azure. All right. And of course, you can utilize this as well in creating your own Copilot, which we have done. We've used the Copilot Studio, and we've integrated it with Azure AI in order to build our own. So you can use Copilot for Azure for any line of business. All right, if you're a knowledge worker, you have Copilot for Power Apps, as well as if you are a frontline manager or if you're any leader, you have Copilot for Power Apps that you can utilize. And then, we have the C-suite. So this is all the different types of Copilot SKUs that you can utilize. No matter what your role is, no matter what your line of business is, there's a Copilot for everyone and for everything. All right, now just to talk about some announcements that were made by Microsoft. So Copilot from Microsoft 365 is now available for CSP customers, and it's for all sizes. So the cost that you were seeing initially, which is $30, that was per month. However, Copilot is on an annual term, so it will be $360 per user per year. All right, so as you can see here, it's available as a per user per year license. So if you are interested in purchasing Copilot, there will be an upfront payment for that. However, we do offer discounts. So there are some MSPs that don't offer discounts, so we can go ahead and provide you with some savings there. So feel free to contact us in order to get started with your Copilot journey. However, before January 16, there were some announcements that were made by Microsoft, before it became available to CSP customers. So it was initially rolled out to enterprise customers just so that Microsoft could test it with, a larger customer base. And there was a prerequisite at that time where you would need to have the Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. And there was a minimum seat of 300 that you would need in order to purchase Copilot before January 16. Now, starting January 16, it's now available to all channels. So it's not just for enterprise agreements, it's also available for CSP as well as for direct Microsoft customers. Now, for the prerequisites, based on the fact that Copilot is now available for CSP, the prerequisite would be either Business Standard, Business Premium, Office 365 E3 or E5, or Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. All right, so based on the fact that these are the prerequisites, there are no minimum order seats. So you can order any amount of Copilot licenses that you need. You can order one, two, just to get your team started. And then you can always increase the quantity, when you would like to roll this out to more persons within your organization. All right, so those are some of the announcements that were made, before January 16, as well as what's happening now as of January, the 16 and onwards. Right, now we're going to dive into some of the features and benefits of Microsoft 365 Copilot. All right, now based on the fact that Copilot uses large language models, you would have to provide prompts in order for Copilot to generate responses for you. So these are some of the apps that you can utilize prompts in order to get generated responses from Copilot. So you can use it in the Microsoft 365 chat. So an example of a prompt that you can ask Copilot to do is help me prepare for my next meeting. All right, so if you do have a meeting coming up and you don't have the time to go through all your emails, check, what are the topics to be discussed, you can actually open up your Microsoft 365 chat and ask it to help you to prepare. And just to also share my experience, I have actually used this prompt, and what Copilot did, it asked me which meeting I would like to prepare for. So it checks your calendar to see what meetings you have upcoming, and then it will ask you to verify which specific meeting you would like to prepare for. Now, when I identified what meeting I would like to prepare for, it pulled information from my email. So it pulled emails that I had sent to that customer. It also pulled PowerPoint presentation that I would have sent to them. So it uses the information within Microsoft Graph in order to provide you with a quicker and a faster response on how you'll be able to carry out day-to-day tasks. All right, so this is one way as to how you can use Copilot in Microsoft 365 chat. You can also use it in Microsoft Teams. So an example of a prompt that you can ask is, what decisions were made in a meeting, or what are some of the suggested next steps that were discussed. So if you aren't able to make it to a meeting, or if you have joined the meeting late and you would like to catch up on what was discussed, you can actually ask Copilot to provide you with a recap of the meeting, just so that you can stay up to date in any decisions or any next steps that were discussed. All right, and I have been using Copilot in Teams every day, to be honest. And when I'm in a meeting, Copilot pops up on my screen and mention that I have 10 minutes remaining in the call, and it actually proactively asks me if I would like it to give me a recap of what was discussed. So with that meeting notes that it provides me with, I am able to copy and paste that information, and I can now put it in an email to send to that customer to give them a recap of what we have discussed. So that would have saved me a lot of time in having to take notes and having to draft an email myself. All right, so an example of how you can use Copilot in Outlook now, you can ask it to draft a response to a specific email thread, and you can even ask it to use a professional tone, or you can ask it to use a friendly tone, just to convey certain points in a specific flow. So if it's a case where you would like to have an email drafted and you don't want to have to write that email from scratch, you can ask Copilot, what you would like for them to draft the email on. You can provide the points, and it will automatically generate that email for you. And you can always tweak it, because we do recommend, reviewing the responses. You can always adjust it. So if there's any specific information that you want to remove, or if you want to add, feel free to customize it. So Copilot provides you with that structure, and you'll be the person to make it your own. All right, so these are some of the features that you can use in Copilot when it comes to getting prompts from the Microsoft 365 apps. All right, and there are some other applications here that you can use Copilot in, such as Word. So you can ask Copilot to write an article on the importance of creating work-life balance. All right, and we here at Upcala, we've actually used Copilot to help us in creating one of our blogs that we have posted on our website. So we do have two blogs, one comparing the Copilot SKUs, and the other one about making the most out of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So we did ask Copilot to help us in rephrasing some sentences. We did ask it to generate a sentence for us on this specific topic. So it can write an entire article for you without you having to go in and and type it yourself. So that's the power of Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can even use it in PowerPoint. So if you would like to change the text format of the titles in a PowerPoint presentation, to a specific font size, you can ask it to do that, and it will automatically change all the font for you. So instead of having to go into each individual slide, having to change that, you can ask Copilot to do it, and it will do it for you in seconds. All right, now when it comes to using Excel, we know that this is a tool that you use to execute data. So if you are looking to, let's say, show a total sales, for specific products, and you would like for Copilot to format it in a table for you, you can ask Copilot to do that. So it will calculate the total sales for the data, and then it will put it into a table format for you. All right, so these are just some examples of what you can use Copilot for. You can also use it in OneNote, Whiteboard, as well as Microsoft Loop. All right, so when it comes to using these different prompts, I do have a resource in the next steps that I'll be sharing with you, which is the Copilot Lab. And this gives you different examples of prompts that you can ask Copilot. So if you're not sure what type of prompts you should ask it, we do have some more examples that we can share later on in the presentation. All right, now I would like to give you some survey results based on usage of Copilot and how it has actually helped organizations when it comes to improving productivity, increasing efficiency, and just overall making your day-to-day life easier. All right, so when Copilot was rolled out, these are some of the results that were gathered in surveys that were sent out. So based on those results, 70% of users had mentioned that they've had more productivity in using Copilot. 68%, they've said that Copilot has improved the quality of their work. So you can be, one of these users as well in having more productivity gains when it comes to your day-to-day activities. All right, now for email processing, I'm not sure about you guys, but emails for me, that takes up most of my day, right? So based on the results here, 64% of users have mentioned that they've spent less time processing email. So when it comes to drafting emails from scratch, responding to email that you've received from persons, Copilot can help you in taking lesser time in getting an email out or responding to a specific person when it comes to communicating with internal users or external users. All right, now for information search, we know there are a lot of times where we may need to look for information, whether in SharePoint, in OneDrive. And instead of you having to go into these individual applications, you can ask Copilot to search for this information for you. And as you can see here, 75% of users have spent less time searching for information in their files. So instead of having to look through all your PowerPoint presentation, looking through Word documents, OneDrive, trying to find the information, you can just ask Copilot to find that information for you, and you get it in seconds. All right, so these are some results. As you can see here, this is the source. This was a survey done when Microsoft 365 was rolled out in the early access program. So that was back in October. All right, now when it comes to meeting, searching, writing, and summarizing, these are some results as well, where users have said 3.8 times, it has helped them in getting a quicker way to catch up when they've missed a meeting. And when it comes to task or searching or writing or summarizing, users have mentioned that it's 29% faster, all right, than them having to do all of this on their own. All right, so Copilot is impacting lives. All right, and just to give an overall number of hours that users have saved in using Copilot, per month around 10 plus hours were saved for some users. All right, and of course it really depends on your usage. It might even be more hours or less depending on how you use Copilot, but Copilot is there to help everyone in improving productivity, increasing efficiency, getting things done within a quicker time frame, as well as doing all of this using your data and the Microsoft 365 apps. All right, so I'm gonna hand over now to Jack Bryant, who will be able to talk a bit more about how Microsoft 365 Copilot works, as well as how your data is protected when using Microsoft 365 Copilot. Jack?
Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you all for tuning in today to learn about Microsoft 365 Copilot. My name is Jack Bryant, as Rachel said, and I'm the data and analytics lead here at Opcala. I am very excited to talk about how Copilot works. I like any excuse to get nerdy with anything related to LLMs or LLM-driven solutions, large language model-driven solutions. So I'm going to try and demystify Copilot a little bit. And I'm going to pay special attention to the security and data privacy dimensions of the product. And at a high level, there are 3 topics I'm going to address in this attempt to demystify how Copilot works and how it keeps your data protected. The first topic I want to talk about is what I like to call the building blocks of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So what are the core components of the product that make it work? And not just make it work, but also enable Copilot to provide more functionality and value that you wouldn't be able to get with another solution unless you were investing an inordinate amount of time, right? It would be very difficult, if not practically impossible, to achieve some of the unique functionality and value that you get with Copilot compared to alternative products or compared to creating your own product. And I say this partially from firsthand experience. So the second topic I want to address could be summed up as the data protection dimension of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So how does it actually protect your data? But that's not all that I want to cover in this domain. I also want to talk a little bit more holistically about the security and safety considerations of using Copilot. And this ties in really closely with Microsoft's focus on responsible AI, which is a very broad topic in a lot of ways. So it's not just data privacy, but it's also how do you protect your individual users. And Rachel, if you go back for a second, I'll start on that previous slide. I'm just kind of going through a brief walkthrough, a brief teaser of everything first. And finally, the last topic I'm going to do that I'm especially excited to talk about is the architecture of M365 Copilot. And the architecture of the product is really the answer to the question, what is happening when a user sends a query to Copilot? What happens when you send a question over to Copilot? And this topic will have the most detail. However, I will keep it relatively high level while still showing you all of the most important pieces of Copilot as a technology and how those pieces fit together. So without further ado, let's begin with those building blocks of Copilot. And that's what you're looking at here. We have it split out into kind of four building blocks. And the first one is large language models, LLMs. And the reason it actually says large language models here is because depending on exactly which version of Copilot you have and where you are using Copilot from, so which application you are using Copilot from, the large language model that you are going to be primarily interacting with is going to be slightly different. However, in general, whenever you have an individual session with Copilot, you are going to be utilizing more or less a single large language model to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And currently, that's a slightly modified version of GPT-4 or GPT 4.5. This is a large language model that's a foundational large language model developed by OpenAI in partnership with Microsoft. And we don't have a lot of details about exactly what modifications they make to these models, but it's safe to assume that they are investing quite a bit of effort and resources into not only improving these models, but also to adding on additional safety features. And I'll get into kind of the holistic safety aspect. There's a lot of different components that go into model safety, not just the models themselves, but a lot of the pieces around the model. So a lot of that safety is not just generated from doing special things to the models, but it's really putting pieces around the models to help kind of offset some of the weaknesses of the models. Because high level, what these large language models do is they take text in, and this is changing a little bit with multimodal models, but I'm going to not go down that rabbit hole right now. So in general, what these large language models are doing is they're taking in text data from you and also from the graph. And we'll get into the Microsoft graph, which is kind of a fancy buzzword. It's really just your data. It's that simple. It's everything in SharePoint. It's everything in Teams. It's your emails. You can even extend the graph to include stuff that is outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. And you can even create your own. Custom code that can actually extend the graph as well. So I will touch on that very briefly, but that's an important part of Copilot solution. And I think that's actually the core of what makes Copilot uniquely valuable. The large language model piece is actually not super proprietary to Copilot. Anyone can go and use GPT 3.5 for free and get a lot of the value of just the large language model alone. But to get the value of the Microsoft Graph, Copilot is really the best way to do that. In addition to the graph, which I can't emphasize enough how well the graph is described simply by saying your data. It is your data. It does sound very fancy, but it is a series of tables behind the scenes that contains text data, PowerPoints, all sorts of stuff. But you also have the applications themselves. So Copilot is also interesting compared to similar solutions because it is able not only to see the context within Microsoft 365 apps. So in other words, when you're using Copilot from within PowerPoint, it's able to see all of the different aspects of the current PowerPoint you're working on. It is also able to actually take actions within those Microsoft 365 applications. Right now, you're not going to get ChatGPT to actually do anything for you within PowerPoint. You could use it to help create some of the copy, to help create some of the text content for the slides, but you would not be able to use it to actually style the slides, create designs and things like that. And so there's some really interesting work that's been done on that. If they're in general, but especially about how it's able to perform these actions, I would be happy to take any questions. To me, that's extremely interesting from a technical perspective, how they are achieving that. And finally, the web. So the web is an important component here, and this is something that is less unique to Copilot. So frankly, this is one of the sort of less unique pieces in my view, because this is something that was already done before Copilot with Bing Chat, and it's also done by a lot of competitors, but it's very important. And the reason that it is so important is because these large language models, which is kind of the engine that drives a lot of this, it's what enables the chat to be able to process language, so understand language that you are sending it, but also to be able to output language. So it all kind of goes back to the large language model. However, those large language models are extremely costly and time consuming to train, and also to test and deploy. So those large language models have a date cutoff. And a lot of people may be familiar with this if they use ChatGPT, especially in the early days when the date cutoff was seemed a little bit more pronounced. But the addition of this web component is extremely important because it helps to address this weakness, right? So it allows the large language model to reach out to the internet if you want it to. You can actually customize this in a lot of ways, but it allows Copilot to look out to the internet and find data that is not at all in its training data. So it allows it to answer questions that would not be possible for it to answer accurately. It might answer them, it might hallucinate, as a lot of people say, and give you a completely incorrect answer. With the addition of not just the graph, not just the apps, but also the web, it helps to minimize those hallucinations, reduce those hallucinations, because it allows it to ground its answers in real data. So Rachel already introduced the concept of grounding. I'm going to touch on that much more in the final slide that I have. And I'm also going to get a little bit more specific. I think grounding is a fair term, but there's something a little bit more there, in my opinion. So let's move on from the building blocks, Rachel, if you would, to the security topics. Thank you very, very much. So there is a lot to cover, even just thinking about any one of these things that you see on the screen. And really, these are very intertwined. So these are kind of all loaded terms in their own right. However, I will try and touch on some important aspects of security in general, data privacy, responsible AI compliance. These are all, again, very interrelated things, but very important things when you are thinking about deploying Copilot, thinking about getting ready for deploying Copilot. What do we need to do? There's a lot to unpack here. So let's jump into a couple things. First of all, one important aspect of the security of Copilot is the fact that it is all running within the Microsoft service boundaries, within the Microsoft 365 service boundary and compliance boundary. And all this means is that using Microsoft 365 Copilot, you are not reaching out to servers that are outside of the compliance boundary that Microsoft 365 provides you. And this means that you are using private instances of these large language models. So you're not using, behind the scenes, you are not just using an API that calls out to OpenAI servers, which frankly would be running on Microsoft, but you're not using standard OpenAI servers. You are using private instances of these models. And what that means is, it is the way that it is architecturally set up, there is no way for the models themselves to have any memory of what you are talking to them. So there's no memory involved whenever you are interacting with the model. And what this means practically is that every time you are sending a query to those models, you're actually having to provide the entire chat history. In whatever session we're talking about, you're having to provide that chat history as well as any additional context that is being drawn in. And so that actually provides a lot of security, even though that sounds maybe a little bit like there's got to be a better way. There is not right now. And that the fact that you have to do that it introduces some complexities, but it also provides a layer of security, because the models themselves are somewhat isolated. Even though they're interacting with the data that you're giving them, they are not retaining that data in any way. And this also ties in closely with compliance, right? There are a lot, compliance is completely different depending on the organization you're talking about. Everyone has different sort of compliance guidelines, and a lot of those are shared across different organizations, but still, compliance looks very different from organization to organization. However, the cool thing about Copilot is it allows you to leverage a lot of the work that you've already done potentially with Microsoft Purview, setting up data labels, setting up all sorts of kind of advanced compliance concepts. Those are in a lot of ways leveraged by Copilot, and I'll get into the details of how those are leveraged in the next slide a little bit. And also with privacy, it's important to know that whenever you're using Copilot, you are not getting any sort of elevated privileges. So as a user, whenever you're using Copilot and you're reaching out to the Microsoft graph behind the scenes, so you're asking, hey, tell me about give me presentations on Microsoft 365 Copilot. It is only going to be able to see the data that you already have access to. So it is not going to be in any way able to elevate your privileges or try and find insights with elevated privileges and then, do some sort of after the, ex post facto reduction of your permissions. You are not going to be able to have any access to data that you do not already have access to. So the cool thing about that is if you've already invested significant effort into securing your data and making sure that you have very secure data, you're going to be able to reap the benefits of that with Copilot. However, if that is not the case, it becomes even easier to navigate laterally across the organization. And so when you think about sort of the cybersecurity implications of that, it becomes a lot easier for anyone to get access to any data because you can use this tool for whatever you want, right? You can ask for anything you want, and it's going to be able to use Microsoft Search, which I'll get into, which is how it actually finds the relevant information and context from the Microsoft Graph. So it's important to know that if everything is set up correctly to begin with, you're going to get a ton of value out of Copilot from a privacy perspective, from a compliance perspective. However, if not, it can result in some issues. So it's really important to spend some effort to understand how your data is currently secured and where you want it to be before you actually roll out Copilot. And finally, I'll touch briefly on the responsible AI piece. This actually, from Microsoft's perspective, encompasses everything I've already said and more. But one piece of the responsible AI principles of Microsoft is the idea that they want the AI to be safe to use, right? So they want to protect users of the AI, of Copilot in this case. And so that means that every time you are sending something to the large language model, it's getting filtered for any sort of nefarious content, violence. You can actually customize this a little bit. You can customize it much more if you're creating your own Copilots, but there's filtering going on at a high level. There's filtering going on whenever you are trying to reach the Copilot large language model. So whenever you are putting data in, and also before the data comes back to you, it is also being filtered. And this is a really non-trivial thing. This is one of the most difficult things about developing and deploying solutions that are driven by large language models, because this responsible AI piece and really the safety piece especially does not come baked into these models, right? There's efforts made to do that, but as a lot of you may have seen, it's very easy to get around these. It's very easy to jailbreak these. And so I definitely wouldn't suggest that Microsoft efforts are perfect or that it's impossible to get it to generate harmful content. However, I would definitely trust Microsoft a lot more than a lot of other smaller shops that are trying to do this sort of stuff in-house. So that in my opinion is one of the significant sources of value that comes with Microsoft 365 Copilot. Okay, I think we can jump in now to the architecture. And if there are any questions about any of this, please ask. Be very, very happy to answer any of these. So this might look a little bit overwhelming. In my opinion, this is a fantastic diagram because it stays high level in my opinion, but it does not abstract away any of the really important concepts or interactions of these different puzzle pieces. And what I kind of want to do is just go step by step. What happens, again, like I said, when I kind of previewed this, what happens when a user sends a query to Copilot? And there's a lot going on here. So again, please, if there's anything that doesn't make sense here, anything that's concerning, post a question. I'll be happy to answer it. So first of all, one thing I'll also highlight before I get into these steps, not to tease those too much, but you can see around pretty much the entire diagram, there's this Microsoft 365 service boundary. And that's something I discussed briefly earlier. And while that might seem kind of abstract and not mean anything, it really does. And it means that all of what's going on here, except for the couple of things that you can see on the left, which I'll touch on, all of this is happening within essentially a private instance. So the large language model, all that stuff. Also, what I will point out before I continue with the individual steps is in the middle, you see this big Copilot logo and beautiful logo. What that represents Copilot itself. So if I had to give a definition of what is Copilot itself, and this is really stealing from Microsoft's lingo, and I think it sounds very nice, but it's also accurate. Copilot itself is best described as an orchestration engine, right? So it's really Copilot is what is orchestrating all of this, right? Copilot isn't really the large language model. It isn't really the Microsoft Graph. It's kind of, Copilot is really the glue that brings it all together. and the value that you get is kind of the sum of all these different parts. So Copilot is the orchestration engine that brings all of these pieces together. And so now let's get into step by step what's going on. The user, first of all, step one, the user prompts are sent to Copilot. So this could happen from a variety of different places. In other words, you can access Copilot from various different places, different Microsoft applications. There's also a Microsoft 365 application you can get to from navigating to office.com, for example. And so you can access it from a lot of different places. But in any event, the user prompts are sent to Copilot. This is generally going to be a natural language prompt. So, hey, can you please give me a summary of this Teams meeting? So let's say I'm accessing it from within Teams. Please give me a summary of this Teams meeting. Next, step two, Copilot accesses the graph. So this is accessing your data that's within Microsoft. Optionally, it may be accessing the web or other services for grounding. So this is getting into that grounding phase. They tag this with pre-processing. So they describe this bigger picture as a pre-processing stage. And there's a couple things that are going on here. So first of all, it has to determine what your intent is or what your intents are with the question. And it needs to understand, before it even starts to reach out, it needs to understand, okay, do I need to reach out to something, right? If I'm just asking for the definition of a computer, it doesn't necessarily need to go and search the Microsoft Graph to give me an answer. And really, that wouldn't be a great use case for using Copilot. I might as well just use Google or ChatGPT for that matter. But an important step is interpreting the user intent. So it needs to interpret the user intent and decide where it needs to search and how it needs to search. So there's really almost a miniature, there are several models that are actually used in this stage to turn your query into a series of additional queries that are going to be run on the Microsoft Graph, right? So you could think about this as taking the query and then coming up with something like a SQL query to look at the Microsoft Graph and pull in the relevant context, right? Because if I just say, hey, can you please summarize this Teams meeting? The Teams meeting is not at all within the training data set of the large language model. So the large language model has no understanding of this Teams meeting, what has happened, right? So when I ask it that question, it will know, right, through these initial pre-processing models, it will know that it needs to go to the Microsoft Graph and say, hey, pull the transcript from this Teams meeting, right? Because otherwise it's going to have no chance of answering this question correctly. It might hallucinate and give me some bogus answer, but it's not going to be accurate. So it's going to the graph. It could also be going to the web. And then on the side, you'll see these, you'll see Dataverse and Power Platform Services. You'll see plugins, right? These are things you can set up. They don't necessarily come out of the box. However, the exception of that is the web piece that does come out of the box. But extending the Microsoft Graph, you're going to have to, that's a big conversation. It can be extremely valuable if you have data outside of the Microsoft Graph. And I will say, if you have no data in the Microsoft Graph right now, which if you're using any sort of Microsoft product, you do have data in the Microsoft Graph, but say you didn't, there would be very little value, in my opinion, overall using Copilot. Now, most organizations, that's not the case if you're using any sort of Microsoft product. However, if you are using Microsoft products, but you're also extensively using other products or have data that is outside of the Microsoft Graph, it is, I won't say it's trivial, but it can be easy if what you're doing is very standard as it relates to extending the Microsoft Graph. However, it can also involve some pro code development. However, the tooling for that within VS Code is getting quite good, and that's something that I've actually just begun playing with and is very interesting. So the tooling and everything that relates to extending the graph is improving dramatically. However, out of the box, you're really just going to have access to the web via Bing and your existing data that's already within Microsoft Graph. Okay, now after that, the Copilot is going to send the modified prompt to the large language model. Okay, what does that mean? It's sending the modified prompt to the large language model. What that means is it's sending your initial prompt plus the data that it has retrieved, right? So it's found this relevant data using something called Microsoft Search. And there's a lot of terminology here, and I apologize, but that's just the nature of the beast with Microsoft. So Microsoft Graph, the way that is accessing the relevant data is using Microsoft Search. And Microsoft Search is essentially a search engine for users to find relevant information within the Microsoft Graph. And it relies on a couple things. It's not that dissimilar from Google, except it's running on, instead of it's running on all these different web pages, it's running on your data. And it's using something called semantic search. And I won't go too deep into that, but essentially what Microsoft is doing is it's vectorizing all of your data, and that allows it to do something called semantic search, which is different than just simple keyword search, right? So you can ask something like, hey, what did this person say about, what did Rachel say to me in the latest emails about Microsoft's AI solution, right? And even though I might not have said Microsoft's AI solution in any of the emails, it can actually semantically understand. It can understand the meaning of what I'm saying. And even though I might not have used those exact words, it'll be able to find the relevant emails. So it actually, Microsoft Search is using semantic search, but it's also using keyword search. So it's a hybrid approach. And this gets into a little pro tip for using Copilot, is that when you can, it is useful to give as much context as you can as to what semantically do you want. So just explaining it in natural language, but also providing some keywords, especially when you're looking for really buried stuff within Microsoft Graph. So if you want help finding emails that are probably buried somewhere in your inbox, it is useful if you can think of those keywords to include those, because the Microsoft Search is using a hybrid approach when it comes to finding that relevant data. Anyways, I'm getting too off track there. Let's continue. So what is this modified prompt, right? The modified prompt is what you asked. To reiterate, it's what you asked. There's also something called a system prompt, and that is a whole nother discussion, but that's what's telling the model in general how to act, right? And so that helps it be more professional. It helps it understand kind of what its goal is, right? Which would be to help you as the user. Those actually get really long when you're talking about enterprise solutions. But a simple, like an oversimplification of that system prompt may be something like, hey, be a helpful assistant and help out with whatever question you're asked. Okay, so that's part of this prompt. This prompt is getting big, but there's also any of previous chat history, we talked about that. Okay, keep going down. Then the context. So really the important thing with this modified prompt is, okay, what you asked initially, and then the context that it retrieved. So this grounding is also called retrieval augmented generation. So in that retrieval, in the grounding process and the retrieval process, it's finding the relevant data and it's appending it to the prompt. And that's how it gets it to the large language model. So it's sending that off to the large language model. Copilot receives the large language model response. This is not to mention the fact that it's actually filtering this as it's going to the large language model to make sure that there's nothing, that could be harmful within the prompt itself. No one trying to jailbreak the model, etc. Copilot receives the large language response, and then it receives the prompt and then begins generating the response, right? And once it generates the response, it will then actually access the graph again for compliance and purview. And what this means is, again, this could be a little concerning because it's like, why is this happening now? Why is this happening after the response is generated? But it's important to remember that when Copilot is initially going to access the graph, it has the permissions of the user and it's not able to see anything that the user doesn't already have access to. This step 5 is actually looking for data security labels and stuff along those lines and adding that to the response so that the user can see any security labels that are associated with the resources that were utilized to answer the question, the initial question. So this may or may not be a particularly valuable step depending on how much you already have set up in terms of data security within Microsoft. Finally, Copilot is sending that response back to the user. So after all this is done, finally, Copilot is sending the response back to the user. Now, this may seem linear to some, it may seem non-linear because of like the craziness of all these arrows. Even if let's say this is the linear version, this is still an oversimplification, right? In reality, a lot of this is happening iteratively. So in a lot of cases, Microsoft is going to make multiple calls to the Microsoft Graph before even sending something to the large language model. And also, once the large language model generates a response, sometimes it's making multiple calls to the Microsoft Graph. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that even this doesn't capture, but this does, in my opinion, capture the key important components that make up Copilot as a technology, right? And again, how do they kind of fit together? What are the different interactions of these pieces? Okay, I think I've said way too much. I'll hand it back to Rachel for some action items. And again, happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Jack. Definitely, I'm pretty sure a lot of us appreciate, the walkthrough of how the architecture works, and I couldn't have done this without you. So thank you so much for, going a bit deeper and, providing some technical aspects of how Copilot works and how prompting is a key ingredient to getting the responses that you